All right. Well, welcome back to the second podcast, and today's a bit of a special one because we've got a guest on, and today we're joined by Luke from Hoddesdon. And yeah, we're going to do a bit of an interview / conversation type deal. So how we all been? How we been finding life at the minute?
Tiring.
I agree.
Yeah.
So you're still at school though, right, Luke? You're still doing that?
Yeah, I'm still going in sixth form every day. So it's not as bad as the first lockdown where it's complete cold turkey on going outside and seeing people.
That's good.
Yeah, we were just talking about that before you joined. Was people are actually going to school now, so it seems a bit more sociable. And people are at least seeing others now. Yeah.
Yeah.
How's it? Oh no, go ahead.
Okay. Most of my social life probably would have been people from school anyway. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, same. I'm where I am. I'm miles and miles away from literally anyone, so I have no one.
Yeah, Jack recently moved, so. But yeah, how's it been sort of music-wise within schools? Like, because obviously we haven't seen what it's like now, but what's it been like?
I mean, I'm not actually at John Warner anymore.
You're not?
So I have no idea what John Warner's like.
Okay.
But like, I don't think a lot of people are doing music in the sixth form because all the people who were in my class, pretty much all of them have left.
Right.
So.
And I guess outside of school as well, there's not really the same level of musical interaction going on at the minute.
Yeah, because everything's online. So.
Have you been doing much like songwriting and stuff in lockdown?
I mean, the first lockdown, I was definitely doing more because I had loads of free time and loads of reflection was going on. But like, I have so much schoolwork now, I really don't get any time.
That's such a shame. That's such a shame.
I don't miss that. That's the one thing I don't miss is not having enough time. A lot of people have written quite a lot during the lockdowns, as you say. With writing, like because of the time that we're writing and the sort of bleakness of it all, is that influencing how you're writing, or are you just sort of on the same way that you were before?
I'd say that like my writing has been more of like within lockdown, it's been kind of a step back, if that makes sense. So because I've been detached from everything that was going on before, I was able to write from the perspective of someone like looking onto my life rather than from my own perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's sort of like a detachedness from the situation.
At the moment, that's kind of how we're all living. We're all just sitting at home watching what's going on. And I guess that's kind of affecting my own perspective on things. And then that translates into...
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I guess, it's been a very introspective time, I think, for a lot of people is, this sort of lockdown, the first lockdown especially, because it was so foreign to everyone. Like this feeling of like, your only connection with the outside world being through your, watching the news and just being completely like isolated. And then I guess you can sort of look back at it from a distance. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, we listened to your tracks actually earlier, and we were just sort of discussing them. And I think we just wanted to know sort of what's your process when it comes to songwriting? How do you start?
So I know a lot of people, they have a really strict like lyrics first or melody first or instruments first. But for me, like it genuinely is, I will have one really small idea. It might literally be like 2 words or like a note on the guitar or like an effect I found that I really like. And then it grows out of that. So there's not really one set process, but it's one small thing and then I work outwards.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because I'm particularly interested in how other people write, because the way I write, I was saying to Oscar last week, was I just have like books upon books of random notes that I make and then sort of go, that's pointless or whatever. But like, do you find yourself writing down loads of ideas and then not finishing them or coming back to them later on with a whole different view of it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you literally look at like the GarageBand folder on my Mac, there's like 50 gigabytes of just like tiny like 4-bar ideas from like last November that I've never touched, but like I work through them all. And if there's something I really, really like, it'll always be in the back of my mind, and then I eventually get round to it.
I was the song "How Did I," which is on your SoundCloud, was quite. I don't chord-wise, in the terms of the musical context of it, it sounded quite Beatles influenced, and to my ear at least, it might not have been. But I was wondering, like, where musically, what influences you to write the way you do?
I think it's like a big blend of all of the artists I like, but with How Do I, specifically the kind of music I was listening to like over lockdown was a lot of like 90s alternative female songwriters, and so you get a lot of like, you'll have like 4 chords, but then you'll have one that's a little bit chromatic, and so in How Do I it goes like D minor, then B flat, and then E minor. So like that progression is the chromatic one. And I guess that just came from sitting down at the piano and like having all of the other artists in mind and just mimicking it.
Do you play all the instruments on the tracks, and then production wise, how are you is it just all you working on it, or?
Yeah, it's all me. It's all either programmed by me or like there's a couple of drum samples. It's all like my stuff.
Cool. Well, when you first sort of you start with chords on piano or guitar, what's your sort of go-to?
I mean, sometimes I think in terms of like color chords, guitar is so much better because on piano all the chord shapes are very tangible, and that's good if you want to write a really tight progression. But if I'm looking for more interesting sounding chords, guitar. But it depends kind of on where I want to take it.
That's interesting because it's very much the opposite of how for me, I find guitar a lot more constricting and a lot more. When we go from an E to an A and then to it, like I find like guitar's a lot more structured, whereas piano, I mess around with loads of weird chords and it doesn't always sound good. But I figure so that's quite interesting that you're the other way around from that. Currently you've only got 2 songs out, but are you looking at releasing more, or like an EP at some point, or an album even?
I have a song that I'm currently finishing at the moment, so I'm hoping to get that out in December. But like at the moment, it's just whatever I can get done, because I'm limited on like how I can actually record. I've got like my laptop, my amp, and then that's it. So pretty much as I can get done, but I've got a massive backlog of songs that I want to try and finish. I guess I was thinking about an EP, but I'm not far enough along yet to think about that.
Yeah, it'll
happen.
We
were actually talking about that.
Yeah.
I mean, this kind of touches on what we were speaking about last week. Was I think it was right at the beginning we were saying about people who don't need these massive studios of loads of good equipment. They literally just sit down with your laptop or whatever, and just in your phone and just go at it. And do you find that? I don't know if you've ever worked in like a bigger studio. Do you find sitting by yourself and doing everything a bit easier?
I'd say I think when I'm working on my own with just like GarageBand or whatever, I think that it can limit me, but in a way, because I have to work around the limitations, ideas that I wouldn't ordinarily get if I could just use everything come, because I have to work around what I have.
Yeah.
Sure. I think there's a lot to be said for, limitations sort of boosting creativity.
Musically, where did you start, and what really early on influenced you into working into music, and how did you get from where you were to where you are now?
So I started out my musical journey kind of started when I was probably 12 and I started playing guitar. And when I picked up guitar, I was influenced by like your really, really typical like rock guitarists of like the 60s and 70s, like Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix or whatever. But then gradually over the years, as my taste kind of grew out of guitar music, but I continued being a guitarist. So I suppose I tend to my guitar playing adapted with the music that I was listening to. So I suppose that's kind of the journey that I've been on, because I will always be a guitarist first and foremost, but my taste doesn't always suit that. So I guess I just I've adapted, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, definitely.
Speaking of music taste, I guess I could say, what are you listening to at the minute? What's your favourite stuff at the minute?
That is difficult. I don't know. It's just a bit of a mess at the moment.
Sorry, I put you on the spot
Honestly,
there.
Sam.
I had a Hall and Oates phase last month. I really like. I'm gonna go on my Spotify and have a look.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I remember when, like, way back when you were playing some John Mayer guitar, and that was really cool. I was just wondering whether you were still sort of into that sort of very guitar centric, stuff now.
Yeah, I'd say recently what I've been listening to hasn't been very guitar centric at all. Like this year, it's really been a lot of like Fiona Apple and Alanis Morissette, like that kind of 90s female alternative is kind of what this year I've been listening to mostly.
I love that. That's definitely a vibe. Is the plan to eventually gig your stuff, Luke?
Yes, definitely. But obviously that's so like blurry at the moment because of coronavirus. It's something I'm just like, I try not to even think about it because it'll upset me that I can't.
Fair enough. I know that feeling, because it is so difficult now even to just imagine what the future is going to be like. Imagine like being in a venue. It's like crazy now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to be hopeful, but who knows? It's who knows? I've seen quite a few buskers about, actually. Quite a few. Actually, a couple who play piano as well, like busking, which is weird. Like they've got pianos on wheels that they're just moving across the streets. So I feel like that might be a way forward for some people. Is just stripping your music down to the bare bones of a guitar and your vocal, and just going out on the street and playing. Did you ever consider that? Sort of, even if it's not exactly like how you're producing it, that might be an option to do.
Yeah, definitely. Busking's something that's always appealed to me, but not in the current like 2 degrees.
No. Well, no, definitely not.
We were actually, I come up with some questions actually while I was preparing the next meeting, and I wanted to ask you, because we spoke a little bit about obviously the whole COVID thing going on. How has this sort of impacted, do you think, sort of the music industry and sort of your entry into it?
I think obviously the live music industry has just been completely ruined, or maybe irreversibly so, because a lot of venues and things like that are not going to be able to reopen. But I think in terms of my position within it, it's not a positive impact at all, because whereas it's taken me a while to really work on my music to the point where it was good enough that I felt that I could share it, and just as that happened, so did the pandemic. So I wasn't able to go around and play it for people. So that was kind of difficult, because like I'm finally in this position where I'm ready to share my music with people, but I can't really.
That really sucks. Yeah, I know what you mean. It kind of feels like that for a lot of people, I guess. A lot of young people.
It's hit all of us like that, hasn't it? And
Yeah.
for us as well, we were set to record an EP at the start of this year, and then that just went completely away because obviously everything immediately happened straight away. So yeah, it's really screwed everyone. And quite a few other people I've spoken to as well have said very similar to what you've just said, where it's like they were just ready to start and then it completely threw them. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just hoping really that there's a sort of a way to get around this and still find ways to kind of make music and perform it in the safest way possible. Whether that's with social distance shows, I don't know. What do you think? Like, is there a way that we could do this?
It's hard because if you have a show and you say it's social distance, let's be real, it's going to be really, really difficult to stick to that because people move around and people sing or whatever. So I don't know. I think we're reaching a point now where it's like people are feeling very all or nothing about the whole situation, and you know, like where there's meant to be social distancing, if you give people like an inch, they're going to take a mile. And I know that if we were like, as sort of a society, we said we can have socially distanced gigs, they would not look very socially distanced at all.
And I guess we almost have to think, what is the safest thing? And, you know, I don't know about you, but I was really annoyed when I heard about on the news something about, you know, filling stadiums with fans again. And I was just thinking, well, you know, if you want to do this, why aren't you thinking about small scale music events?
Yeah, that really annoyed me too, because you had Rishi Sunak telling, you know, musicians and artists to retrain because the live music situation. And so they're not really giving artists any wiggle room. But when it comes to football, it's a different scenario.
Yeah.
I think it's because I think football seems... I think if you'd said that music was allowed to go ahead, but football wasn't, there'd be more of an outcry, I think, unfortunately. But yeah, I think that's why they're trying to tread around it. It's not the good way to do it, but they're doing it.
With stadiums, they're outside as well, so I guess technically they're safer, but you can have music played in a stadium.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Venues.
Yeah, and like, I don't know, maybe you could have limited sort of, I think there's ways you could get around, like big stadiums, you know, maybe only sell seated tickets at intervals and have no standing, or put seats in the standing area. You know, I think there would be ways of getting around it.
Yeah, I don't think given a lot of consideration to arts at the moment.
No, we're particularly screwed, I think. But I'm trying to remain optimistic. I know it's not great it might not happen, but I'm hoping that if venues do start closing down, hopefully more will spring up in their place. That's my hope. But realistically,
I don't know if you heard, guys, about the Corn Exchange in Hartford shutting down.
What?
The Corn Exchange in Hartford.
I didn't hear about it, actually.
Yeah, that's basically it's going to be turned into flats, and it's a real shame because it was like a really good venue. You know.
Well, we said when we first met, actually, we were having that chat, and we were saying, you know, so many venues that existed 10, 20 years ago they're just not there anymore. And that was before everything started happening. So it's
yeah. Well, that's what we want to do. We want to create those sort of shows and those venues.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're trying to do with Homegrown, but
create those spaces. How would you, to someone who hasn't heard it yet, how would you describe your style?
I'd say existential.
yeah,
because it is very existential and confessional. And in terms of the actual style of music, that's a really difficult one because I'm very flexible. But I suppose it is rock, I guess. I don't really know, pop, rock, somewhere between.
Sure. When I listened to it, it gave me quite like ethereal kind of vibes, and it was a bit dreamy in a way.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I try and keep quite a lot of space in the music.
I had a question about your songwriting. As you say, existentialism. Other than obviously the lockdown and the COVID, what inspires your music? Like what kind of topics do you prefer to more lean towards writing about than not?
My music is written like entirely autobiographically. It's entirely about how I feel. I very rarely find myself writing about another person or like another situation. It's always about like me trying to discuss my place or my self-value or something like that. So it's always about my observations rather than other people.
It's quite a personal experience. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
awesome.
Yeah.
Do you think you see yourself what's the word, collaborating in future, or do you think you're kind of going to be a sort of one-man band?
I definitely can see myself collaborating, but not as like a permanent solution, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Not in a band situation.
I'm very, very possessive over my songs, like to a point where it's hard to even show them to people because of how possessive I am. And so if I was on a permanent basis collaborating with someone and I didn't get the full like reign over it, I would really struggle.
Sort of like the Tame Impala model where Kevin Parker writes the songs and produces it himself, but then obviously on tour he needs musicians and stuff. Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's a good model. I definitely think there's a lot to be said for that, because, like you said, it's kind of your, I guess, intellectual property. When you've made something, you don't want it to be sort of affected by outside influences.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't ever you can't explain to someone how you feel about something because feelings don't move from person to person. And so you wouldn't be able to get someone to understand fully what you write about no matter what. And so if you're working on a song with someone and you're both not in the same space, it gets really frustrating.
Yeah, because it's such a personal thing, isn't it? It's all about how you feel.
If I wrote about like love or something, then it would be different because everyone has quite a similar experience of that.
Yeah, I think that is one of the challenges of collaborative writing. I love working collaboratively writing, but yeah, it can be quite hard, especially if you've got a really solid idea of what you want the song to be like or sound like, and they don't quite get it, or they've got, oh yeah, this might be a good idea, and you're like, no, that doesn't. Let me just work on the idea. So I think personal working can be quite a good way of going about it as well, as you say.
Collaboration wise, if in future, I guess maybe this is more like a hypothetical question, but if you could collaborate with any artist, who would it be, like, of all time?
We'll get into this.
I would love to collaborate with John Mayer, definitely, because I think that we would be able to bounce off of each other. But obviously that's a very big go, isn't it?
John
you went straight to the top there. That was a good one though. Definitely a good answer.
John Mayer would be quite an interesting person to work with, I think. Because he's also quite, from what I understand, he's quite sort of, he does quite a lot by himself. So
yeah. He's a great, from what I've seen as well, like he's a very creative guitarist. Now, I don't know much about guitar, but like every clip I've seen of him play, it's like nothing I've heard before.
He really does. He really does like exploit the full range of the guitar.
No,
For sure, man.
Brilliant player. Brilliant player. Similar to Clapton in that way, I guess, is he's so... The way he uses a guitar is almost like he doesn't view it as an instrument. It's almost like a tool that he's using to express himself. It's really clever way of using the instrument. I was listening to particularly Donna Kebab, this came down to, although sort of How Do I as well, was lyrically your music feels quite, and goes back to what you were saying about it being quite personal, but lyrically your music's feels very, what's the word, slice of life almost. It feels like it is, you very much saying exactly how you feel, and it's, like, how long does it take you to come up with lyrics? Because I find them particularly hard for me, other than the personal stuff.
I think generally, if a lyric is good enough, it comes straight away. I think if I find myself, if I sit down to write lyrics and they don't come within about 5-10 minutes, I give up, because then they're probably not going to be good if they're forced out. So like Donna Kebab, that first verse came, I literally played the chords out and it was kind of just like, they just came out, the words did.
Yeah.
So like anything that's good or usable comes straight away. And
Do you find yourself, yeah,
if it takes any longer, it's probably not usable because it feels forced.
do you find yourself going back on older songs and changing lyrics, or something you thought was good, going back to it and then going, no, that's no good, and changing the whole thing? Do you find yourself doing that?
I think like every song I write, every time I write a song, I have to give it a couple of days to settle before I start actually creating it, because every idea when it comes sounds quite good, but then you listen back and only some of them actually survive, and something like, what was I thinking when I said that, or like, what on earth was the chord progression? So I think, yeah, I do look back, and I have loads and loads of songs from like years ago that I still think are really good, and I have some that I thought were really good at the time and now I do not think are good anymore.
Yeah,
because we spoke about this before, how it's like once you've almost released it, if you release it, unless you hold it back forever and never release it, but once you release something and then look back on it and feel differently about it, it's almost like the audience are going to feel completely different. They're gonna, when they hear a song, obviously, like we were saying earlier as well, the song means something completely different to you because it's about how you feel. But then an audience is going to listen to it and completely interpret it in a completely different way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you find some artists will release something and then look back on it in like a year or so, and they'll go, that was pointless. That was not very good. So I think this is something I'm trying to learn with writing, is you kind of just have to, when you've written something, just let it go and don't fuss over the little minute details, I find personally. Otherwise, you're going to sit there for ages trying to get something good out of something that might not be that good.
Yeah, like you said, Luke, you just sort of, if it doesn't come naturally, the lyrics, you just give up on that particular set.
Yeah, because I feel like a song isn't going to mean anything to me lyrically if it's not natural. If I've had to sit down and think of the lyrics with a lot of concentration, then that's not natural songwriting. That's just work. That's just an assignment. That's not me communicating.
It's a bit too English language, like. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think yeah, it has to be natural. It has to feel right, doesn't it?
No point doing it. There's no point in being a musician if it's not coming naturally, because it's one of those things where there's no right or wrong way of doing it. So the way from your soul is the only like guidance.
Wow. Yeah. No. Yeah. So it's like you can't force art. You just have to let it happen. Yeah. No. That's an interesting way of looking at it, because I think there's so many people who look at it from the completely opposite angle, and to them it's more of like, it's like there's art and then there's craft, and to them it's like craft and it's just forcing it and pushing it, and it's very formulaic, and you know, like they've got it all planned out. But I like your perspective of, you know, letting it flow naturally and organically. I think that's a good way of doing music. Yeah, because I'm not a songwriter particularly, but I know that it's like I have tried to write lyrics before, and so I guess your advice for anyone trying to write lyrics is to let it sort of flow.
Yeah, it will come when it will come. Because I've had like months where like I couldn't get a single lyric out, like months where nothing was good, and then months where there was like 20 ideas for a song coming in a day. So it happened on its own. And individually, you haven't really got any power over it.
Yeah, you just sort of have to let it happen to you.
Yeah.
You're playing, you mentioned earlier, you let a lot of space into the music, and that's what I was going to describe it as like ethereal. But do you find yourself almost minimalistic looking at how you're using the music, or do you think of ways to make it quite intricate altogether, but keep it still quite empty?
I would say I'm not a very minimalistic person at all. I'm really focused on, I think there's like minimalism, and then there's being able to leave space in your music, but the parts where you don't put space are incredibly thought out. So I might have a track that's really quite empty, but when I am playing on it, what I'm playing is very, very carefully thought out and very nuanced. Because I think the nuance takes your like song from just a song with chords and lyrics to like a scape of sound.
It's interesting way to put it, as a sort of a wall of sound. I think Phil Spector describes it as, isn't it? So, yeah, sort of hits you. Yeah, I think I'm a bass player mainly. I think when it comes down to bass, I don't try and think of really intricate ways of doing a line or something that's really busy. It's how you place the notes and how you're using your instrument to contribute to the rest of the music.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, definitely. And I think taking in the position of bass, I know you say you're more of a guitarist, but in the position of bass, it's very much how can I almost sort of support the other instruments, but also make myself sound interesting and still. So it's kind of finding that balance between almost showing off how good you are versus, you know, just sticking to something that serves the song more than it would otherwise.
Yeah, because Luke, I know you're pretty technically, you know, skilled when it comes to guitar, but in your songs, it's, you know, you're not, you know, shredding or, you know, doing anything too overcomplicated. It's like taste, isn't it? And yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I rarely ever shred. Like, rarely.
Even though you can, because I've seen you play guitar. You're a great player, but I know what you mean. Like, you've got to serve the song. And I think yeah, that comes in a lot. I wanted to talk a bit about sort of the area and stuff, and sort of what do you think this area needs in terms of music?
That's really difficult because I'm quite new on the whole, like, being a musician in the area, if that makes sense. So I'm yet to really have very much experience. I think, like, you definitely, like, when I was looking at sixth form, a lot of the music department, they're really not giving a lot of thought. I know for Warner, like,
definitely.
the music department for Warner was really quiet. It was just there, but it wasn't really, the school didn't give it very much thought. I think music,
it's an afterthought.
Yeah, I think music is taken for granted, and that needs to change. And people need to realize that music doesn't just happen. The radio and albums don't just appear out of nowhere. There's real people making that, and like, you have to support those people if you want to keep listening to music.
Absolutely.
It's quite an interesting point actually, because last week we've cut this out of the actual final thing, but we were talking for a while about musical education. Would you think that like maybe more support in that would help flourish a more musical group of people? Because I personally don't have much background in an education around music. I just kind of taught myself. But do you think if we had like a proper support for it, do you think there would be more creative people coming out of it?
Yeah, I definitely think people would see it as an option, because a lot of people have this attitude that, oh, I really enjoy music, but you can't make a career out of it, or there's other things that are more important. But think how much music actually impacts our daily lives. It really does, and people don't actually realize that there's people behind that. And I think if there was better music education, people would give it a second thought and might actually discover that they're really good at it or really interested in it, and there would be more appreciation for it.
Definitely, man. Yeah, I think that's the thing that really annoyed me about the whole Rishi Sunak campaign about retraining and stuff, is that, you know, that so much work goes into being a musician, you know, and it's like kind of taking that for granted. And if we don't have the sort of, you know, if we don't take it seriously, you know, if schools don't take it seriously, in terms of like funding and support and programs and stuff, I mean, yeah, I don't think people really understand, you know, how much goes into it.
Yeah,
It's definitely not just
people don't attach like people to music. They just turn on the TV and there's an advert with music on it, and they don't think about how that's actually gotten there, because plenty of people have had to actually work on that. People just assume that music appears from nowhere, and that's not how it works.
Yeah,
definitely.
sucks.
I think it's definitely not just as well musicians. It's all the arts as well. The support for them is really lackluster. And as you say, with Rishi's latest scheme of retraining, and as you say, with like adverts and stuff, there's so much that goes into something so simple, and yeah, definitely needs a lot more support.
Yeah,
there isn't any. Yeah,
I know people now who are, you know, dancers who basically can't get any work at the minute because of COVID.
Yeah.
And it's like the biggest slap in the face to say everything that you've trained your whole life to do, you should pack it in and try something else. And I think it's like important that, yeah, creative people sort of stand together in that.
Yeah, a very similar thing for actors as well. Like actors who are trained to be live as well, they're also just getting completely thrown to the side. Musicians, I think we're in a slightly better position where we can sit at home and create like a whole album, like sat where we are now. Whereas like a dancer or an actor or someone can't just put out like a dance show in the middle of their room. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, it definitely needs more support.
What's the next move for you though, Luke, in terms of musically? I guess like obviously COVID aside and all of that, what's sort of the next step?
I suppose just sort of I mean, I'd like to be able to gig in future, but obviously that probably won't happen for a while, and just meet some more musicians and sort of develop, I guess. Nothing particularly serious for a while, just sort of see what happens, I guess.
Honestly, I think that's probably the best that we can all do at this time. Well, it's been great, guys. We'll plug, we'll put a link to Luke's SoundCloud in the description, and we'll plug your Instagram and all that. So, but yeah, thank you very much. Thanks everyone for listening, and see you guys next week. Thanks a lot for coming on, Luke. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Very nice. Yeah.